A crying couple at the dog park convinced me my rescue dog was their lost baby. I did the right thing. I gave him back. 3 weeks later, I saw their faces on a neighborhood watch alert. They weren't a grieving family. They were the leaders of an international dog trafficking ring, and they were about to ship my best friend to a collector overseas. I had to get him back, even if it meant becoming a criminal myself. 10 months ago, my world was a quiet, grayscale landscape of grief. Yesterday, I watched a man I once pitied get sentenced to a quarter-century in federal prison, the courtroom gavel echoing the final, violent end to a nightmare I never could have imagined. It all started, as so many things do, with a dog. My dog, Waffle. And it begs the question I've asked myself 1,000 times since. How far would you go for your dog? Let's rewind. Last spring, the dog park was my sanctuary. It was the only place where the suffocating silence of my new, empty apartment was broken by something other than my own crying. My golden retriever, Waffle, was my reason for getting out of bed. One sun-drenched afternoon, while Waffle was chasing a tennis ball with the single-minded joy only a dog can possess, a couple approached me. The woman's face crumpled the moment she saw him, and a raw, guttural sob escaped her lips. Her husband, a man with kind, sad eyes, wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders and steered her toward us. Through his own tears, he explained that I had their dog, their baby. His name was Cooper, and he had escaped their yard a week ago. They had been searching day and night, plastering flyers, and losing hope. I had found Waffle 6 months prior, a shivering, skeletal creature huddled by the dumpsters behind my apartment building. He had no collar, no chip, and his beautiful cream-colored fur was a matted, filthy mess. His ribs were a xylophone under my tentative touch. I assumed, as anyone would, that he was a victim of a heartless dumping. The man, whose name I would later learn was Noah, pulled out his phone. He swiped through a gallery of dozens of photos, a dog that was the spitting image of Waffle, lounging on a plush sofa, leaping into a sparkling swimming pool, wearing a little Santa hat on Christmas morning. It was him. It had to be. Noah called out. Cooper, and Waffle's head snapped up, his ears perked, and he let out a sharp, inquisitive bark. A sound of recognition. My stomach plummeted to my feet. The certainty I had clung to, that I had rescued an abandoned soul, crumbled into dust. The woman, Elena, was now on her knees, burying her face in Waffle's fur, her sobs muffled by his coat as he licked the tears from her cheeks. Noah then did something that cemented their story in my mind. He opened his wallet and began pulling out crisp $100 bills. "We'll give you $5,000, he said, his voice thick with emotion, his hands trembling as he held out the stack of cash. "For taking care of him. For food, vet bills, your time, you saved our baby's life. We were lost without him. We thought our world had ended." I stared at the money, a wave of nausea washing over me. I didn't want their money. More than anything in the world, I didn't want to give up Waffle. This dog had been my furry anchor in the storm of the worst breakup of my life. After my ex moved out, leaving a void that echoed with every footstep, Waffle had become my shadow, my confidant. He was the warm weight against my back on nights when the loneliness was a physical ache. He was the wet nose that nudged my hand, forcing me outside into the sunlight when all I wanted to do was dissolve into the darkness of my bedroom. But as I looked at Elena, who was now showing me more photos on her phone, family vacations to the beach, birthday parties with a dog-friendly cake, my own pain felt selfish. These people were utterly shattered by his absence. Their love for him was palpable, a tangible force in the air between us. If they were willing to part with $5,000 without a second thought, he wasn't just a pet. He was the center of their universe. I was just the person who found him. I was the temporary caretaker. They were his family. "Keep your money," I choked out, the words tasting like ash. "Just take him home. I'm just glad he has people who love him so much." Elena launched herself at me, hugging me so tightly I felt my ribs protest, her gratitude a torrent of whispered thank yous. I knelt down and unclipped the leash from Waffle's collar. As I handed the worn leather strap to Noah, Waffle kept looking back at me, a confused whimper caught in his throat. His big brown eyes asked a question I couldn't answer. Elena coaxed him toward their car with a bright, tearful voice, telling him over and over that he was finally going home. I told myself it was for the best. He'd have a real family, a big yard, another dog to play with that I'd seen in the photos. He would be happier. Noah shook my hand, his grip firm. "You're a good person," he said, his voice layered with a sincerity that felt utterly genuine. Not many people would do this. I stood rooted to the spot in the now empty dog park, the silence rushing back in, louder than before. I fought the tears, but it was a losing battle. They streamed down my face as I watched their car pull away, taking the only source of light in my life with it. I had no idea when we woke up that morning that it was our last day together. The following 3 weeks were a special kind of hell. My apartment reverted to its state of echoing emptiness. I'd wake up in the middle of the night reaching for a warm body that wasn't there. I'd instinctively save a piece of bacon for my breakfast, only to remember with a fresh pang of grief that he wasn't under the table, waiting with his hopeful, thumping tail. The silence was absolute. I bought a goldfish, a desperate attempt to have another living heartbeat in the space, but its silent swimming was a poor substitute for a creature who genuinely vibrated with excitement at the mere fact of my existence. I started avoiding the dog park, the sight of it a visceral reminder of my loss. I finally threw out his bed, the sight of its empty cushion making me want to scream until my lungs gave out. But through it all, I held on to a single, comforting thought. At least he was happy. He was home. I kept a sliver of hope that they might contact me, maybe send a photo of him settled in, but the silence from them was as complete as the silence in my apartment. Then one mundane Tuesday night, everything changed. I was scrolling through the Nextdoor app, half-heartedly looking for a used coffee table, when a post made me drop my phone. The headline was stark. Warning: dog kidnappers active in our neighborhood. Below it was a grainy, blurry photo from a security camera. The post detailed a sophisticated scam. Criminals, often working in pairs, were targeting purebred dogs at parks and in yards. They would sell them to puppy mills or, for the most valuable breeds, to wealthy collectors in Asia for astronomical sums. Their method was always the same: a heart-wrenching sob story about a lost pet, designed to manipulate the owner's empathy and guilt them into surrendering their animal. My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the photo. The quality was abysmal, but there was no mistaking them. It was Noah and Elena leading a handsome German shepherd into the same dark sedan that had carried Waffle away. The post specifically mentioned that English cream golden retrievers, a term I'd never even heard before, were a prime target, fetching upwards of $20,000 from collectors in China. I had never known Waffle was anything special. To me, he was just Waffle, the goofy, loving stray who had patched the holes in my broken heart. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't loved him. They had targeted him. The tears, the photos, the offer of money, it was all a meticulously crafted performance. They had studied me, seen my bond with Waffle, and used my own decency, my own empathy, as a weapon against me. I had been conned by professional dog traffickers who were likely planning to sell the one being that had kept me sane to a life of misery in a cage. I didn't know how, but I knew one thing with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones. I was going to get my dog back. I was going to find these people, and I would burn their world to the ground, even if it meant becoming a criminal myself to do it. My first coherent thought was to document. I screenshotted the Nextdoor post, my fingers fumbling on the phone. A quick search for dog trafficking rings Portland, Oregon opened a Pandora's box of news articles. Dozens of stories from the past year described the exact same MO. The same sob stories, the same couple dynamic, the same heartbreaking loss for unsuspecting owners. An article from the Oregonian detailed how English cream goldens were a status symbol for a new class of wealthy elites in China, and that once the dogs were on a cargo ship, they were as good as gone forever. The thought of Waffle, terrified and alone in the dark belly of a ship, sent me running to the bathroom, where I retched until my stomach was empty. Back on Nextdoor, I found the profile of the man who had posted the warning, Connor Mitchell. His page was a chronicle of this couple's crimes, a digital detective's notebook filled with security footage from different locations, showing them with different dogs. I sent him a frantic message, my thumbs flying across the screen, explaining what had happened to Waffle 3 weeks ago. 5 minutes later, he replied with an address. His neighbor had seen their car parked there just yesterday. By 2 a.m., I was parked down the street from a nondescript suburban house, my headlights off, my heart hammering against my ribs. A white work van sat in the driveway, its tires caked with fresh mud. I crept closer, staying in the shadows of the manicured hedges. The van's back windows were filthy, but I could make out what looked like dog hair clinging to the interior. I snapped a few photos of the license plate, the phone screen a betraying beacon in the darkness. As I did, A motion sensor floodlight flared to life, bathing the driveway in harsh, sterile light. I sprinted back to my car, my lungs burning, and peeled away into the night. Back in my apartment, the adrenaline gave way to a cold, hard resolve. I pulled Waffles' old collar from my nightstand drawer, the worn leather a familiar comfort in my hand. I thought of all the nights he had rested his heavy head on my chest as I cried myself to sleep over a man whose face I could now barely remember. I thought of his insistence on morning walks, even when my depression felt like a physical weight pinning me to the bed. They had taken more than a dog, they had taken my lifeline. The police might not help, but that didn't matter. I would do whatever it took. I didn't sleep. I spent the rest of the night mapping out a plan, a vigilante in the making. The next morning, I called in sick to work and dove into the Byzantine world of online public records. Hours of searching for the van's license plate finally yielded a result. It was registered to a shell corporation, Premium Pet Services, LLC. The business address was a warehouse in an industrial park 20 minutes from my apartment. There was no website, no phone number, no reviews, just a business registration filed 8 months ago. I drove there immediately. The warehouse was anonymous, a large, gray metal box with no signs. But I could hear it, a faint, desperate chorus of barking from within. I found a grimy window and peered inside. My blood ran cold. Rows upon rows of wire cages were stacked 3 high, each containing a dog. I saw beagles, poodles, German shepherds, and then, in a far corner, a flash of cream-colored fur. It was a golden retriever, pawing frantically at its cage door. From this distance, I couldn't be sure it was Waffle, but a desperate hope surged through me. It had to be. I retreated to my car and called the police non-emergency line. I laid out the whole story, my voice tight with urgency. The operator was dismissive, telling me animal control would look into it within 72 hours and that I should file a report online. The mention of international trafficking was met with a sigh. It was clear they weren't going to do anything in time. That evening, sitting in my silent apartment, I stared at Waffle's untouched food bowl. In 72 hours, he could be on a ship to Shanghai. Desperate times called for desperate measures. I texted my old roommate, Alex, a person I hadn't spoken to since my ex moved in, and our lives diverged. My text was 5 words I never thought I'd type. I need your help. Crowbar. An hour later, Alex was at my door, dressed in black, a steel crowbar in hand, no questions asked. That was Alex. When I laid out the story, their face hardened. They mentioned a cousin who worked security at the port of Portland, who had been complaining for months about suspicious agricultural shipments to Asia where the paperwork seemed forged. The next cargo ship, the cousin had said, was scheduled to depart in 48 hours. At dawn the next day, Alex and I were parked across the street from the warehouse, armed with coffee and a notebook, conducting our own stakeout. Around noon, the familiar dark sedan pulled up. My entire body went rigid. Noah and Elena got out. She was carrying a small, fluffy white dog I hadn't seen in the warehouse. They went inside. 20 minutes later, they emerged, empty-handed, and drove off. We follow them, Alex said, already turning the key in the ignition. We trailed them across town to Riverside Park, a popular spot for dog walkers. They got out and began strolling along the paths, looking for all the world like a normal couple enjoying a sunny day. Then I saw them stop. They approached an elderly man sitting on a bench with a beautiful Shiba Inu. Elena sat down next to him and, as if on cue, burst into tears. My hands shook as I raised my phone and hit record, while Alex moved closer, pretending to tie their shoe, trying to overhear their conversation. It was the same script. The lost dog, the heartbreak, the doctored photos on the phone. The old man's face softened with sympathy. He began to unclip his dog's leash. I couldn't watch another person fall for it. I ran toward them, yelling, "They're thieves. They're the dog kidnappers from next door." Heads turned. The park went quiet. Elena's tears vanished instantly. Noah's kind-eyed facade dissolved, revealing something cold and menacing underneath. "You should have minded your own business," he said, his voice a low threat. He grabbed Elena's arm, and they strode away without looking back. The old man, Harold, was trembling. When I showed him the next-door post, his eyes filled with tears. His dog, Koji, was all he had left after his wife passed away. That night, armed with a new pair of bolt cutters, I returned to the warehouse alone. The place was dark and silent. As I approached the chain-link fence, I heard it, a distinct double bark that sent a jolt through my entire body. It was Waffles' I'm excited bark. He was in there. But as I raised the cutters, I saw them. Security cameras, mounted on every corner of the building, their little red lights blinking in the darkness. It was a trap. Breaking in would be useless. I retreated again, my frustration mounting. I spent the rest of the night researching pet theft investigators and found a name that appeared repeatedly: Detective Ray Holloway. I left him a long, rambling voicemail. He called back the next morning. He was interested, but my video wasn't enough for a warrant. He suggested a different angle: microchip fraud. 3 days and 4 vet clinics later, I found her. Dr. Sarah Nguyen at Riverside Animal Hospital. She recognized Waffle from my photo. A couple, matching Noah and Elena's description, had brought him in the previous week. They claimed his microchip was causing a recurring infection and insisted it be removed. She had thought it was suspicious, so she had kept the chip. She scanned it. The ID number matched Waffle's records. She printed out the clinic's security footage and promised a sworn statement. I called Holloway immediately. He said the vet's testimony was the smoking gun he needed for a warrant, but the bureaucracy would take at least 48 hours. My heart sank. He had also seen the shipping manifests. A large cargo ship was leaving for Asia in 36 hours. The clock was ticking. That night, Connor from next door organized a protest. A dozen scammed owners, ready to descend on the warehouse with signs and news cameras. I knew it was a mistake. It would spook them. They'd move the dogs. After a heated call, Connor agreed to hold off for 24 hours if we could organize a citizen watch on the warehouse. Harold and his son took the first shift. Just as I was settling in for my own watch, Alex called. Their cousin at the port had come through. Premium Pet Services had booked a container on tomorrow's ship to Shanghai. The manifest listed 47 units of agricultural products. The container was already at the port. They were moving the dogs tonight. I called Holloway. He was still waiting on the judge to sign the warrant. "I'm 20 minutes out," he said. "Do not engage." Around 10 p.m., Harold sent a text. "Big truck just arrived." I floored it, running red lights, my mind a blur of panic. When I got there, Noah, Elena, and 2 other men were loading cages into the back of a semi-truck. I counted over 30 cages, each filled with the sounds of desperate, crying dogs. Then I saw a cage with a flash of golden fur. Waffle. He was limping. I couldn't just sit there. I followed the truck. I called Alex and told him to meet me at the port. Holloway's texts became more frantic. "Wait for backup. Do not do anything stupid." But I couldn't let that truck and my dog disappear into the night. The port was a maze of cranes and containers. The truck sailed through security. I parked outside the fence and watched as they began to load the cages into a massive shipping container. Alex arrived with bolt cutters. Their cousin, they said, was about to accidentally break the main loading crane. It would buy us 30 minutes. As we waited, the massive crane lifting the container into the air suddenly shuddered and stopped, leaving the container dangling 20 feet above the ground. Shouts erupted. In the ensuing chaos, Alex and I slipped through a blind spot in the fence. The container's doors were slightly ajar. Alex wrenched one open. The stench that rolled out was a physical assault, a putrid combination of feces, urine, and pure fear. Inside, in the beam of my phone's flashlight, was a vision from hell. Cages were stacked to the ceiling. Dogs of every breed were crammed inside, some 2 or 3 to a cage. There was no food, no water. I saw bloody paws, patches of missing fur, eyes crusted shut with infection. I found Waffle in a middle cage, his tail giving a weak, pathetic thump against the wire. He was so thin. While Alex worked on the lock, I documented the horror, my phone capturing images that would sear themselves into my memory forever. This wasn't just theft, it was torture. The light from the doorway was suddenly blocked. Elena stood there, her face ashen. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling with a fear that seemed genuine. "This is bigger than us. These aren't people you can cross." In the distance, the first wail of a police siren began to rise. Elena's eyes widened. She turned and fled, disappearing into the labyrinth of steel containers. Alex finally broke the lock. Waffle practically collapsed into my arms, too weak to stand. As I held him, Alex began opening other cages. Dogs poured out, a torrent of barking, howling freedom. The port descended into chaos. Security guards, police, and animal control swarmed the area. Noah was tackled as he tried to run. In his van, they found the motherlode, shipping schedules, buyer contacts, and records that exposed a vast trafficking network spanning the entire West Coast. The days that followed were a blur of vet clinics and police interviews. Waffle was severely dehydrated and malnourished, with infected wounds on his paws. At the emergency vet hospital, run by the heroic Dr. Nguyen, 12 other families were tearfully reunited with their stolen pets. But 28 dogs remained unclaimed, and we learned that 7 more had been shipped out just days before our raid. They were gone forever. The FBI got involved. Elena's real name was Anna Volkov, and she was a known associate of a Russian organized crime syndicate. She was apprehended at the Canadian border and, facing serious charges, she began to sing. She gave them a second warehouse in Seattle, where 62 more dogs were rescued. She gave them names, dates, and locations. She exposed the entire rotten enterprise. Waffle came home, but he was a changed dog. The happy-go-lucky retriever was gone, replaced by a timid, anxious creature who growled at strangers and flinched at sudden movements. The trauma was deep. A GoFundMe started by Connor raised over $15,000 for the vet bills. Noah pleaded not guilty, his high-priced lawyer arguing it was a mere business dispute. The threats began. An anonymous email with photos of me, of Waffle, with a simple message: drop the charges or lose more than your dog. The FBI found bugs in my apartment. Alex moved in, turning my home into a fortress. The legal battle dragged on for months. Motions were filed. Delays were granted. Witnesses were intimidated. Anna Volkov was found dead in her cell, an apparent suicide that no one, especially not the FBI, believed was a suicide. Noah was released on a $2 million bail, paid for by an anonymous offshore account. He confronted me in a coffee shop, his voice calm, his threat veiled but clear. The darkness felt like it was closing in again. But amidst the fear, there were sparks of light. Waffle slowly began to heal, thanks to a patient trauma specialist named Jasmine. Our nonprofit, the Stolen Hearts Recovery Network, received a massive donation. We built a national registry for stolen pets. And then the break. The FBI arrested the judge who had set Noah's bail. He had been on the trafficking ring's payroll for years. With his corruption exposed, the case against Noah was airtight. The trial was short and brutal. The photos from the container, the vet reports, the tearful testimony of Harold, who told the court that his dog was the only reason he hadn't taken his own life after his wife died. It was overwhelming. The jury returned a verdict in 3 days, guilty on all counts. 25 years in federal prison. It's been 10 months since the sentencing. The relief came, but so did the understanding that trauma doesn't end with a verdict. Waffle still has nightmares. I still check the locks 3 times before bed. But we are healing. Jasmine and I are together, a family forged in crisis. We bought a house with a big yard. We adopted another dog from the case who never found his family. Our nonprofit is thriving, reuniting pets and owners across the country. Yesterday, at the dog park, Waffle really played with a pack of other dogs, his tail a joyful metronome in the afternoon sun. He chased his ball, a flash of cream-colored lightning against the green grass, finally, completely free. The work is never done, but now we are not alone.